This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life.
Hi there. As this recording is distributed, the British Open at Royal Troon will have finished this previous week. I'm ahead of the game in recording this short introduction, therefore I don't know the result. No doubt though, the Open Championship will throw plenty of drama and tension, therefore being able to embrace feelings of discomfort and overcome fears will be something the champion golfer will have to work through. And this is where this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast is helpful. Last week it was Tom Jones, and this week it is Trevor Jones that I chat with. Trevor gives some fascinating insights into playing and performing with trust.
Hi there, Trevor. It's great to catch up with you again. It's obviously been a little while, a few years since we recorded episode 99, I believe it was, of the podcast. So yeah, I'm going to refer people back to that episode, obviously. There's some fantastic bits of advice there and stories from yourself. Today, though, we're going to look at a different topic, aren't we? We're going to have a look at the yips. And yeah, you're going to share your experiences and some words of wisdom, I believe. So yeah, over to you, Trevor. How do you want to just refer back to the yips and what actually, goes on for people in their brain and their body?
Yeah, the yips, the dreaded yips. We should probably add to that, right? It's, you know, my heart goes out to anyone that's suffering with it currently. I've got quite a few clients on my roster now, and it can be just such an unpleasant place to be. So, yeah, if you are suffering currently, my heart goes out to you. But there's been a few angles that I've been exploring over the last few years that seem to be making a difference. I think this conversation isn't about having all of the answers, but maybe this is about exploring a few new angles that people may not have heard of before. So I think the genesis of this was, by and large, actually more so through my coaching career. People coming to me in a golf setting, having these problems, and kind of starting to sort them. I kind of noticed that there were almost two forms of it. There almost seemed to be more of like a technical yips, and then there almost seemed to be more of a psychological yips. And the technical yips, by and large, poor technique or technique that was very conducive, very small margin for error, should we say, like the goalposts in terms of success were tiny, like really, really narrow. So the leading edge would be digging into the ground. The low point would be way before the ball, and as soon as you get some kind of soft ground conditions or a tight lie and a sandwich in hand, you're in big trouble. So the kind of the technical yips, you could argue, are almost the ones you enjoy, spending some time with, because you get success pretty quickly. And then it seems like, for the most part, it's not that the yips aren't going to happen again, but for the most part, you're setting people on a journey that's a pretty easy course correction. But then there's the second type, which was the psychological yips. Now, this was the bit that, maybe going back 7-8 years ago for me, was the bit that was kind of most confusing, but also the one that I got really curious about. And I did a lot of looking into, what the literature was saying and what so-called, in kind of air quotes, experts had to say at the time. And of course, I listened to all that stuff and I tried all that stuff, and some success, but for the most part, I have to say it felt like pretty thin soup. It really didn't go that far, kind of with clients. So yeah, I dug a little bit more, and simultaneously, I was spending a lot more time in clinical psychology, and started to find some things there that I found very interesting, and made a few kind of connections, which we're going to talk about today.
Okay, do you want to expand on that last point there about the clinical psychology and what it is you did find and yeah, how it's gone on to help people.
Yes. So I was doing a lot of looking into clinical psychology, as a mental performance coach now and working across various sports. I just found so much solid stuff in that space, particularly stuff that had been coming out maybe more recently in the last 10 or 15 years. There's some very, very exciting things happening in clinical psychology. So spending more time in that space and starting to notice a few connections as I did more and more research into trauma, and starting to see, like, having a few kind of light bulb moments. And then I was attending a psychology conference in Denver in the States last year, and I bumped into a sports psychiatrist from New York, a chap called Jorge, and we just hit it off like immediately. Kind of, I remember that evening we went for dinner with a couple of others, and we just started talking. Uh, and then, he does a lot of work in Major League Baseball, and the Yips came up, and the conversation that we had was just like massive light bulb. It was just phenomenal. We were really like, it's just a fantastic moment. So that really set me, or kind of, I suppose, convinced me that I was on the right track in terms of looking more towards trauma. And essentially, if we look at the Yips this way, in the Yips psychologically are the older parts of your brain are trying to save you from an outcome that you perceive as being too threatening, right? So the older parts of our brain include a response, which everyone's probably heard of fight or flight, but we've got a couple of other responses in there as well. So we've also got the freeze response, and then the real extension one is flop and drop, where we just completely, the vagus nerve takes over and shuts everything down, and we fall to the floor. So if you're getting attacked by a bear, for instance, trying to fight that guy off, you're probably going to, you're not going to survive that. So the vagus nerve kicks in and it immobilizes you. So essentially the bear thinks you're dead, right? And increases your chance of survival. So we're talking about, we see this in all mammals, this response. So we're talking millions of years old as an evolutionary adaptation. So if we get into a situation where the outcome has that level of threat, then this old system is going to start to kick in to try and save us. Now, there are a couple of interesting features to this, because there's no kind of snakes, spiders, tigers, or bears around. Last time I checked, maybe unless you're playing in the Rocky Mountains or whatever. But sometimes I say to clients, no one ever developed the Yips marooned on a desert island, right? The threat here is that this is happening in a social context.
Yep. So
You
you're
with me?
worried about what other people are thinking, essentially, if you miss this 2 foot or 3 foot putt.
You got it. The threat is to your sense of self, is to your sense of competence, is to your kind of place in the hierarchy of the group, right? A very famous behavioral psychologist, Harry Harlow, who did lots and lots of research in the 50s, 60s, and 70s into primates, came up with this very famous expression: a lone monkey is a dead monkey. If you're out of the group, you see what I mean? That's social isolation. You're in big trouble. So, that desert island experience, if no one else is around watching that, yeah, of course you're going to hit, you've kind of Tom Hanks in Castaway, right? You've created your own little par 3 course, you've got nothing else to do, right? But with nobody watching, sure, you're going to duff shots, but is that going to turn into the Yips? It's certainly not.
Yeah, you're not going to have that emotional experience of which is, I suppose, essentially where you're going potentially with this, that real feeling of embarrassment and shame and just wanting not to be there, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you remember that incident with Ernie Els at the first hole of Augusta?
Yes, I can
Remember
feel it in
this?
my body.
There we go.
Even now.
Like, was it like a 5 or a 6 putt on the first green?
I think there might have even been about an 8 putt, in all honesty. Yeah,
And they were all from within 3 feet,
yeah,
right?
it was horrible.
And the quote, was he said when he ended up actually putting reasonably well the rest of the round, right? But the quote he said when he walked onto the range the next day, yeah, and he could kind of feel the eyeballs looking at him. Do you know what he said? I felt naked.
Mm.
Yeah, like he felt vulnerable. His place in the hierarchy was under serious threat. So acknowledging that this is happening in a social context, I think, is a really important first step. It's not just you, it's how you're being perceived and how you're perceiving yourself. Yeah. So here kind of becomes like we get into like an ever tightening trap loop with this, because the issue then becomes it's not just the experience in terms of the result of the shot that becomes threatening. It's our own experience, it's our own anxieties, it's our own embarrassment, it's our own thoughts, our own judgments of ourselves, it's our own feelings. So our internal experience also becomes a threat. Like, and as a metaphor, if we said this, this is a bit like, we're on a journey, right? With this, it's almost like we're kind of driving a car, and as we're going along on our life journey, we're accumulating these passengers. Yeah. Now you get into a bump in the road, so you have this kind of yip experience, and these passengers start appearing around. You better not do that again. Yeah. What are the people in the other cars thinking of you here? Yeah, stalling this. You with me?
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Now, this is where this is kind of the key pivot point as to whether people kind of get into this tightening trap loop or not, is where their own passengers start to become an enemy that needs to be gotten rid of. Now, the problem, and this was very much kind of what I kind of walked into in my first looking into the Yips, was this: we need to get the right thoughts, the right feelings, the right emotions. We need to get these ducks in a row in place first. So classically, we need to work on the player's confidence. We need to work on them feeling calm. They need to be relaxed. We need to distract them, right? The problem is you start to turn your own passengers in the car into something that needs to be suppressed, controlled, or gotten rid of. And now you're screwed. Because the last time I checked, there is no way of getting rid of those passengers, right? And there is no way of getting rid of your history, because there is no delete button in the nervous system. Everything you've ever done is going to come with you. Every passenger is going to be there.
Yeah, and if you're standing over a 3 foot putt to win the Masters, or a 3 foot putt to win a club championship, or whatever it is, then are you really going to be calm? Are you really going to be relaxed in that moment as well? That's highly unlikely. You're going to feel uncomfortable, aren't you?
Of course you are. Yeah, of course you are. I mean, you could be, never say never, right? It could be, we don't know, but you're right, for the most part. So
yeah, you could have a 10-shot lead, I suppose.
yeah, yeah. So this, this is where the trap loop tightens, okay? Because we get into a paradox with this. Is on a neurological level, this is the vagus nerve, which is the main nerve that kind of connects the brain to the body and is particularly of interest in trauma. That's a little bit like the brain's handbrake. Yeah. So if we think we get into this situation, players often kind of get this sense of being somewhat frozen over the ball. Yeah. So they'll step up to hit their chip or to hit their putt or whatever, and they just can't pull the trigger. Well, that's because the handbrake is fully on. Yeah. And then what they do as a response to that is they try and apply more gas. Sorry, I speak to lots of Americans these days. They really start pushing harder and harder and harder on the accelerator. And guess what happens?
They basically, if it's a putter, they can't take the putter back.
Yeah.
Or they take it back, and it's very stabby.
There you go. There you go. So if you push hard enough on the gas, eventually, if there's a little bit of kind of letting go of the handbrake, the car just vroom, right? Or you get this kind of, with learner drivers, it's like kangaroo petrol.
Yeah.
So you get this very jerky action, but this tension, this kind of responding to the handbrake being on with more and more gas, is going to, that's the highway to hell. That's the highway to hell right there. So, this idea of, because this is happening in a social context, have you ever had this experience of kind of being at the front of the queue at the traffic lights, and you're doing something else and you haven't noticed that the light turns green? Yeah.
Yeah,
Have
been
you ever
there.
noticed? Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
been there, and the people in their horn, and come on, hurry up, and yeah, and
Yeah,
then you
you got
stall
it.
it, and
You got it. So if you imagine someone stepping up over the ball, and then within this social context, that's basically like the green light. Everyone who you're playing with is expecting you to do what? To pull away. Yeah. But if this handbrake is pulled on, that's the vagus nerve trying to kind of, essentially, your old system is trying to save you, right? This is this evolutionary adaptation that's kicked in, and you're there revving the hell out of this thing and going nowhere. The tension keeps building. And then, of course, that's when we stall it or jump, kangaroo petrol. And now we've become even more conscious. So you can imagine, like, the learner driver being in this situation. He's sweating bullets. He's flustered, red faced. What's just happened to the chances that happens again next time he's in that situation? He's driving up to the lights. He's like, please don't be, please don't be me, please don't be me. He wishes he was fourth one back, right?
yeah,
Right? You with me? So the trap loop gets tighter when we essentially turn on our own passengers. Yeah. When we try and distract ourselves through this, when we try and arrange the passengers in such a way that can't be and can never be arranged that way. So the classic one of distract your way through it is like saying to the passengers, what's that over there? So everyone quickly, drive. Yeah. Yeah, fine. You're going to get away with that a few times. And that was pretty much what I was noticing this years ago. It was like, oh, this seems like it's working, seems like it's working, seems like it's working. But the passengers, are they stupid enough to fall for that twice? Maybe 3 times? They're starting to con on 4 times, no chance.
yeah,
And this is why we see these distraction techniques have a shelf life.
yeah. So yeah, essentially, yeah, you're going to get inconsistent results. That's the top and bottom of it.
Yeah.
So I'm stood over this 3 foot putt then, or I've got the dart in the hand and I'm ready to throw it, and I'm feeling this level of anxiety. As you say, the handbrake is well and truly on, and I'm running scared. How do we help that person, that performer?
Yeah. That's the question. Okay. So this is where the trauma research has been a huge eye opener, and conversations with Jorge, the sports psychiatrist from New York, has been incredibly helpful. He's helped loads of baseball players who have had the yips and been very successful at it. And here would be my first question to a client, and not always with everyone, but getting a sense of, like, how old is this issue? Like, really, how old is this issue? Like, if you'd be willing to share, like, what's the youngest version of you that ever felt that sense of self-consciousness or embarrassment or concern?
Yeah, for myself, if I was going back to, I'm sure I'm going to show my age now, aren't I? Yeah, it's got to be into, let's say, about 10, 11 mark. I think that's probably what I can remember, and it was an incident. It was nothing sport related, but it was where some friends basically tried to embarrass me, and didn't, yeah, take the piss out of me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can still sort of feel that experience, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're historical beings, right?
Exactly.
I've got something very similar that's very vivid from 5 years old. Yeah. That sense of incompetence, that sense of being kind of on the stage. And this isn't, we're not talking about Freudian, we need to sit on the couch, we need to go back and redress everything childhood. This is nothing like that. This is just like, what if it was something like this? What if it was something like, that youngest version of you is in the passenger seat. He's sensing that same context, right? And what if he's doing or she's doing the only thing that they know is safe, right? They're only small, right? So the only thing that they have access to is what? It feels like everything's speeding up. It feels like there might be danger ahead. So what do? They grab the handbrake. Yeah. It's the only thing they know is safe, is to rip on the handbrake. Yeah. So getting that into people's awareness, there's a part of you, is, the younger version of you is just a metaphor. We're talking about your history, okay? But your history is sensing there's something familiar here in the context, okay? And your history is trying to save you with the only thing it has at its disposal, which is the handbrake.
Mm-hmm.
You with me?
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we get the younger version of you to not pull the handbrake? Okay.
Exactly. That is the question.
Okay. So here's where the trap loop tightens. Yeah. The trap loop tightens if you think of it this way. If you've been spending all your time trying to argue with the passengers in the backseat, trying to fight with them, trying to distract them, trying to tell them to shut up and go away, yeah, what's that younger version of you seeing? Is he seeing someone who's a safe driver and someone he can trust? Or is he seeing a driver who is all over the place and he just cannot trust at all?
Yeah, it's going to be the second one, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, would you want to be a passenger with that driver?
It doesn't sound a very comfortable journey.
So, the long and short of this is being able to kind of, let's say, open up to this discomfort. So there's an anxious passenger in there. There's a passenger, warning you of your place in the social context, right? There's a passenger who's incredibly afraid, worried, concerned about what if this happens? What if this goes wrong? So you've got all of this discomfort in there, and being able to kind of slow down and start to, I don't want to say kind of be okay with the passengers being there, but just not fighting with them. Yeah. Just almost letting them do their thing a wee bit, slightly anticipating them. Yeah. Sometimes even naming them. Yeah. So, yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, so in some ways, we're observing the experience that we're having.
Yeah, absolutely. Just being able to notice that this process is unfolding. You've got all these passengers back there. They're a motley crew of your worst fears, your biggest anxieties, your biggest concerns. Yeah. One of my clients, had a passenger who was really on his case about, how terribly he was doing, how much she was struggling and everything else. He ended up calling that passenger the mother-in-law.
Yeah.
So you've got all of these backseat drivers, you've got, all of these that might be kind of familiar to you.
I suppose I'm guessing the trap that be it the golfer, the darts player, the cricketer, whoever it is, will fall into is, as you say, you've got all these passengers giving you some lip there, if you like, telling you what to do, and they'll fall into what I would class as like judgment mode, where because they're hearing these things in their head, they're feeling whatever it is they're feeling in their body. It's, uh-oh, this is going to happen again to me, and this
Yeah.
is not good. Yeah, again, I want to run away from this scenario. So, is there an argument to say to try and not take your thoughts so seriously, and that your thoughts are just simply thoughts, as a trying to view it in that context could be helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the process that I'm essentially trying to get people to re-engage in is to loosen the grip that the passengers have had, that the experience has had on their attention. Yeah, because this really boils down to attentional processes, where attention has become so tight and constricted around trying to avoid this outcome. Yeah, this huge threat has appeared. That, as I said, this very ancient system, this younger version of you is just pulling on the handbrake to try and save you. The only problem is it's happening in a situation, let's say short game, right? So these fine, you can to some extent get away with it a little bit more so when you've got some momentum. So if you're playing long game, driver, iron shots, where the miss is far wider and far more kind of accepted, you can get away with it. That's a little bit like, the handbrake being pulled on if you're doing 40, 50 miles an hour. To some extent, you've still got some forward momentum there. But if you're doing it trying to parallel park, right, in these kind of fine motor skills, the pulling on of the handbrake is just not going to help us out, or pulling away from a standing start at the traffic lights, if we kind of use that metaphor. So the key to this is, as we start to become more willing to have these passengers on board, we start to liberate our attention to be placed where? On the task at hand. And the task in this sense is, can I start to pull away smoothly? Like, how would I do that? That would be about very gently applying the accelerator. As and when, and even when we feel this tension, so somewhat like an openness that this is going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take a bit of retraining for this younger passenger to trust you again. But he's not going to trust you if you keep arguing with these passengers, trying to get rid of them, trying to distract them. Like I said, that's just going to be more of the same. That's going to tighten the trap loop. Like you would if you were in the passenger seat and you're watching a guy driving and he's on his phone, or and he's looking out the window and he's looking around and he's arguing with everyone in the back seat. That's not a journey I want to take. And if I felt threatened, I'm going to rip on the handbrake. So if I'm looking over and I'm seeing a driver who can have all of this kind of maelstrom, and still remain on the task. You with me?
I am, yes. Yes.
Kind of slowly but surely, that trust score starts to be built. And I don't feel the need to rip on the handbrake, at the drop of a hat. So it's an iterative process. We've got to walk through. It's going to take some time, but we're connecting with processes that are, the technical speak would be values-based exposure and inhibitory learning theory, right? But when I'm working with a client, I'm never going to use those terms. This is about, can we start to kind of seek out situations that have previously been terrifying for you? So can we deliberately get the passengers kind of all riled up? And can we learn to steady our attention, slow down, and start to reconnect with the task on the hand? And the task at hand in this case is hands on the steering wheel, eyes on the road, easing the foot onto the accelerator. That's the task.
Yeah. Makes sense. So that task focus is the key. But obviously, it is this for people who are listening or watching this, they're going to be thinking, well, but my mind's going absolutely crazy all over the place. Sounds very, very, sounds great, this does in principle, but the reality is that it's going to be damn hard to do. So how do we train it then?
Brilliant. It's number one will be learning the skill of being able to what I call drop anchor. Okay. So in an emotional storm or in a cognitive storm, right? Let's say all the passengers are really, really wild up. Don't go there. Oh, this is going to happen. Oh, we're going to, what will that person think? Oh, if this happens again, I won't have a golf game. I'll have to give up the game, right? So as you said, this is all just, there's a lot of craziness kind of within that experience. Their mind's everywhere. They have this kind of deep sense of dread, about kind of walking into this. Learning to drop anchor in that space. So we're talking about some grounding exercises. Would you be willing to just do one with me right now?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So this is taken from trauma therapy and has had huge amounts of success in that space, changed a lot of people's lives. So what we're going to do is a grounding exercise just by focusing on the soles of your feet and where they are and how they're connected to the floor. So if you're willing to, just be about 30 seconds. So I'd just like you to just take a moment just to notice what it feels like to wiggle the toes on your left foot. And now just take a moment to notice what it feels like to wiggle the toes on your right foot. And now notice what it feels like to wiggle the toes on both feet together. And then let them rest. And now notice you have 2 feet in touch with the ground. And just mentally, I'd like you to almost in imagination, take a little highlighter pen and just slowly draw an outline around your left foot as it touches the ground. And then slowly take that highlighter and draw an outline around your right foot as it touches the ground. And now just notice that you have 2 feet in contact with the ground. Okay, very cool. Thanks for that. What showed up for you then?
So I know that exercise and I use it a lot, although I've got to say the highlighter pen part I hadn't come across before. And it was the highlighter pen bit was like, it was a really weird experience of the feet all of a sudden like, feeling ridiculously heavy on the ground. So like
Nice.
naturally, yeah, and many thoughts that were going through my head just went straight down to the ground. So yeah, I've quietened the mind an awful lot by doing it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So they felt kind of quite heavy, felt very connected to the ground.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Scale of 1 to 10. Well, yeah, I was playing that in my mind, the scale of 1 to 10, in all honesty. Before we started the exercise, I was probably about a 6 out of 10. By the end of doing that 30 seconds, I was nigh on an 8, come 9 out of 10.
Okay. In
But
terms
yeah,
of groundedness.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
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 I suppose I imagine it, and that's suppose the way I teach it, if you like, is tree roots like being grounded
Yeah.
into the floor. And that was me by the end of that. But
So
then,
that's an exercise called the islands of safety. So what it's doing is, in this cacophony of thoughts and feelings, uh, when this kind of sense of dread or terror or fear or anxiety kind of washes over us, being able to retreat to the islands of safety is it helps us to establish a sense of safety in one's own body. Yeah. And this is essentially is starting to activate from an attentional point of view, a sense of, from that place, where would we now like to place our attention? So this gives us very sure footing, if you kind of excuse the pun, gives us really sure footing to then make our next step, which is when I pull the trigger and how I apply the pressure. Yeah. So historically, it's been, fight with the passengers, distract the hell out of them, and then slam on the accelerator as quickly as you can. And this is like doing the opposite. This is starting to kind of lean into that experience that was previously feared. Yeah. So sometimes I say, if you've got like really tight muscles in your back or your neck or whatever, and you go for a sports massage, and that physical therapist finds a knot, and you're like, oh God, yeah, that's it, that's the one, yeah, right? Do you then say, oh no, don't touch that, no, don't go there? And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, and then or he or she then just works around everything else, or are you willing to lean in? Yeah, and
yeah,
this is exactly the same. Okay. So this is about getting in touch with spaces or places that previously really narrowed our attentional and behavioral, the technical speakers, repertoires. But what we're starting to do is we're starting to lean into that, and we're starting to kind of create some flexibility within that space. And dropping anchor in that space is 100% where I'd start with someone. And that would be repeatedly and often. You do a lot of that, just training that skill, training that skill, training that skill, training that skill.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to actually, because so many people you can work with, you can teach that type of skill and exercise to them, and they don't go away and do the homework, if you like, or they might, if we're going in golfing terms, you give them that exercise, you tell them, yeah, you need to practice this day in, day out. It only needs to be a couple of minutes a day. They don't do it, but then all of a sudden they get thrust in that situation, and then they try it and it doesn't work for them. Well, that's exactly why, isn't it? It's like you go to the gym, you can bench press 100 kilos, but you want to bench press 150. You don't all of a sudden just up the racks there and try and bench press 150. It doesn't work that way. You've got to
Yeah.
put in the hard, well, not even the hard work, really. It's quite a,
Yes.
in this case, it's a nice exercise, and
Yeah.
2 minutes a day is better than nothing at all.
I mean, I've got some very, very high caliber players, like really high caliber players that have kind of unfortunately walked into this as being an issue, really big issue for them. And, when I asked them how many times did you drop anchor kind of over the course of the round, and they come back and said, oh, well, I did it once on the first hole, I did it once on 16. And they look at me and then they get very quiet and then they apologize. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if they're dropping anchor 50 times around, it's not enough.
Mm. Yeah.
If they're dropping anchor 100 times in a round, we're getting close. Okay. I'm looking for players to drop anchor, practice that as much, as frequently, and as often as possible in these early stages. It is so crucial to develop this skill. Yeah. Because otherwise we're just off, as I said, arguing, fighting with the passengers, distracting ourselves. That little guy who's in the passenger seat next to you is never going to trust a distracted driver.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I would also kind of have this caveat that it's a really important first step, but it's not the crucial thing. The crucial thing is what we do next. It just allows us to get sure footing to then make the next move.
Mm.
And the next move is starting to gain some control over your physical actions. Okay. So this is how and when you press on the accelerator, and this is your choice, not this fight, flight, freeze response. Yeah. So another exercise that really goes against the social convention is that, because all of these techniques are about, kind of snap a rubber band or kind of sing a song or, look elsewhere or tap your thumb on the club, while you're doing it. And it's all about, everything. That passenger's watching, that little guy is watching, and he's like, I can't trust this guy. Yeah. As I said, you get away with it for a little bit, but the passenger's cotton onto this pretty damn quickly. So this is the thing. Leaning into that discomfort, finding the knot in the muscle and kind of, oh God, yeah, right. Do you want to feel good before the massage or after the massage? You with me?
Exactly, afterwards,
Of
naturally.
course you do. Yeah. Sometimes it's gonna hurt like hell. Yeah. And there's an important journey to be had here. This is part of it. Okay. So there's something I came up with a few years back that's really gained some traction, and not just in terms of the yips, but just in terms of a general sense of really getting hands on the steering wheel, is what I call the still lake exercise. So this whole thing about kind of stepping into the ball, and you've got a window of 5-6 seconds to hit the shot, otherwise bad things are going to happen. Would you agree? That's pretty much the cultural message out there.
Yeah, people are outcome related, aren't they? Yeah, yeah, the thing where the ball's
Yeah.
going to land or if it's going to miss. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I've got to be in flow. I've got to step into the ball. My routine mustn't kind of shift. I've got to kind of, you know, be within 8 seconds. Once I then have to pull the trigger because otherwise it's all going to go wrong. I can tell you now, it's a lie. It's a lie. Because I do this with exercise with people and it's incredible. Okay. So here's what we do is we step over the ball. Yeah. You have a look at the target. Your eyes come back to the ball and then you don't move. You stay completely still and you wait and you wait and you wait. And then you make the smoothest takeaway the world has ever seen. So some of these players are stood over the ball for up to 60 seconds. Yeah. And initially, this is kind of the report on this, right? Initially, get lots of, the passengers have a lot to say about this. Yeah. They really kind of kick off. But you're almost like going up a little bit of a hill, crest of a hill. They're getting noisier and noisier and noisier. And then you reach the kind of peak of the hill and you start to go down the other side. And as you start to go down the other side, you start to notice other things. You start to notice other noises around. You start to notice the wind in the trees, the birds chirping. You notice the pressure, the feeling like, oh, yeah, actually, I'm holding the grip quite tense. You start to kind of relax that. You start to kind of settle in. And from an attentional point of view, we start to go into what's called meta-awareness. Yeah, where we're experiencing what we're experiencing. We're not kind of in the content anymore. We're actually up above it. So we're up another level in terms of awareness. And when we kind of step into that, like the smoothest takeaway the world's ever seen, guys flush it. And they've been stood what looks like from the outside frozen over the ball. And they flush it. And the look on their face when they do that, all levels of players that I've worked with are just find it extraordinary that they could do that. And what it does is it really taps into the key processes here. Okay. So we're tapping into being able to let our attention settle on the task, be fully engaged with that. Right. And we don't have to use distraction. We don't have to rush through it. We don't have to not trust ourselves to be able to achieve that. So it kind of, it imbues the experience with this incredible sense of trust.
Yeah, it's amazing as well. That's going to take some training for some people because the natural response when you're yippy or you're very nervous and you're very self-conscious is
Rush through it. Yeah.
exactly. I was thinking
Yeah.
about the golfer who you're playing with who tees it down there. You turn around and blink and the ball's away down the middle. Well, I was going to say down the middle of the fairway, but probably in the thick rough. Yeah, they've completed their pre-shot in about 5 seconds flat on their swing. So,
And I'm not,
yeah,
I'm
it's
not,
like,
I'm not saying this like forevermore, amen. I'm not saying that this is another strategy. What I'm saying is that we're starting to work the knot.
yeah,
Yeah. We're finding the knot in your back and we're starting to really work at that. Yeah. So, kind of people with suffering with the yips, it's a little bit like a knot in a hose pipe, garden hose pipe. We need to find that and we need to spend some time there. How that then looks kind of going forward, and again, in the sense of true flexibility, is we start to play around with how much time. So, as I said, it's more about getting their hands back on the steering wheel, getting their feet on the accelerator, and they get to choose when they pull away and how they pull away.
yeah. I liken it to an experience I had when I first touched on mindfulness about 10 years ago, where I went to a workshop, which was basically a full day. It was about 10 till 4 and rocked up in this room, 20 odd people, and there was a sign on the door saying, "You're not allowed to talk to anybody else for the whole day." And really, this is weird. This is, and boy, that first half an hour, and then different periods during the day was so uncomfortable because you're doing various different exercises with 20 people. You just want to have a conversation with them, ask them how they are, and get to know them a little bit, but not you can't say anything. And yeah, again, yeah, it just took some practice. I did that probably about half a dozen times and every experience was very different. But you work your way through those knots, as you say.
Yeah, you start to kind of build that sense of uh, starting to kind of hesitate to use this expression, but start to increase the willingness of that discomfort.
Mm. Yeah,
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 like a bit like getting into an ice bath, right?
yeah. We
Yeah,
both love ice baths, so
yeah.
yeah.
I don't
Well,
know, there's a bit of a craze right now, around it, and it's great and everything else. But there's that odd bit that happens a couple of minutes in. Yeah, once you kind of experience all of the discomfort and your mind is very, very chatty about, you know, how horrible it is, and you need to get out. And what if you're doing yourself an injury? Like, what if this isn't safe? You get all the chatter. Um, and when you don't get out, and when you settle in, something interesting happens around that kind of 90-second, 2-minute mark. Yeah.
yeah,
We're kind of, as I said, into almost like I describe it as a bit of like a still lake kind of experience.
yeah. No, I'd agree with that. And then you don't want to get out. Such a nice experience after that. Just
Yeah.
like getting through the
Yeah.
pain first and the discomfort.
Yeah. So it's, if I was to say one thing, if anyone's really struggling, maybe if I'd say three things. If someone's really struggling with this, then my first thing would be like, what would make this journey worth it? Yeah, there's going to be some uncomfortable bits to this. I would ask you about your experience with, the however many days in a row did you mention just off air? You were talking about the number of days you'd achieved in a row of going in the ice bath.
Yeah, 420, I think it was, along those sort of lines.
Incredible, right? And I wonder if we kind of just pulled at the strings of that a little bit. Well, I wonder whether there's something in there that's not. It's not the thing; it's the meaning of the thing. I wonder if there's something in there, like a value that's important to you. That stepping into the ice bath, that stepping into discomfort is somewhat honoring that value.
Well, I see myself as a committed, disciplined person.
Mm.
So I, hence why my podcast's now on like
Yeah,
230 odd episodes in.
there we go.
Yeah,
So can
similarity.
you kind of sense how the form that takes might change a little bit in terms of how it shows up in your life, but that sense of kind of discipline is important to me. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's negative connotations with that as well, which we
Yeah,
touched
I
on.
think it's how it shows up for you is what I
Yeah.
would be more interested in. So getting people in touch with, you're on this journey, you've got these passengers in the car. Let's kind of our first sense of this is let's make this a journey worth taking. Yeah. Like there are going to be some hard things that you're going to do in this. There's going to be you're going to eat some crow here, as the Americans would say. Yeah. It's not going to be easy, right? But let's make this a journey that's worth taking by your definition. Like, what would it mean to you for you to work your way through this? Yeah. So that would be number one. Not just because it's important. Yeah. Then learning how to drop anchor. Yeah. In that whole, like I said, cacophony of that experience, dropping anchor is a real kind of superpower. Um, and then it would be starting to explore the places where your mind says, the passengers say, don't go there, and starting to kind of recognize that it's your hands on the wheel. You get to choose. And as you start to lean into those, that's a bit like saying yes to the physio. When he says, "Oh, should we do this one? This feels like a pretty big knot here." Yeah, it's how willing are you to say yes to that?
It's a nice way to end this podcast episode, in all honesty, because yeah, my next task was to ask you for three key takeaways, but you've just gone and delivered them quite nicely.
Well, I mean, takeaways in a golf sense would be being able to drop anchor, explore the still leg, and you get to choose how you pull away.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, Trevor, whereabouts can the listeners find you, or the viewers find you, should they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, so I'm available on at Mind Your Golf, mind_your_golf on Instagram. So you can message me through there. I've got a website that's about to go live, trevorjonesgolf.com, and yeah, doing lots and lots of work inside the golf space, but also now kind of doing some work with Water Polo Australia and some baseball stuff. So yeah, I mean, these processes aren't unique to golf, but they are helpful everywhere.
Yeah, no, massively. They're transferable. I know when we're doing some of the exercises there, I was thinking about it was when you mentioned about pausing for so long, standing over the ball. I was thinking about a speaker about to deliver a speech and just standing on the stage there and taking it all in before they actually voice the first words. So
I
yeah,
love that.
yeah,
Yeah.
all sorts of backgrounds. But yeah, look, it's been fantastic to chat with you again, Trevor. Um, Fascinating stuff as usual. And yeah, I hope the listeners and viewers enjoy it. I'm sure they will do. So big thank you.
I've loved it. Thanks so much for your time, David. And hopefully there's something in here that's useful to someone.
On the show, we've had some great guests talking about overcoming fear from a range of angles. Alessia Bruno and her role as a brain spotting consultant, where she talked about the nervous system, yips and trauma. We've got Dan Steele, who talked about crashing a bobsleigh in the Olympics and then having to pick himself up to go again. Jeremy Snape, who talked about playing international cricket in India with their huge vocal support. Then we've got the challenges that ice swimming presents with Fenwick Ridley. And this episode with Trevor Jones, again has been hugely helpful. And it comes at it from a slightly different angle. So a big thank you to Trevor for his thoughts and for his ideas. Feel free also to check out episodes 99 and 235 of the podcast to see where Trevor's also been featured. Until next week, take care.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.